morning and welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. Today we have personality and perspective. Serves politicians as well as we folks who walk the streets without any particular titles just as well. We always, Chief will remember that we always try to start Viewpoint with a kudo or two about somebody or something. This will be kind of a generic kudo, if I may. People have a periodically they'll move from house to house or home to home for whatever reason. I've just experienced that, and so for all those families whose family members chip in to help move, kudos to all those family members out there, and there are numerous of them because there's constant shuffling going on all the time, of course. But my two boys and their wives were invaluable to Gene and I, and so to all the Gregs and Jeffs out there, and Paulas and Bobbies out there who help their friends, their parents, their families move. So kudo to them. I think it's appropriate because I think it's most I know firsthand what that means.
They've been there for you, boy.
Yeah, they sure have.
Betcha.
Listen, we have a guest who's once again been courteous enough to come up and give us a little time, talk about what's going on in city government and so forth. We appreciate that so much. And Judy K., why don't you introduce this fella? He's kind of a stranger in town.
I'd be right proud.
Yes, you should be.
Paul Adams is, of course, the police chief in the big city of Lincoln. And, you know, you're the kind of policeman who gives police a good name. There'd be no little kid or big kid who'd meet you and wouldn't think, gosh,
you know, that's kind of permeated.
That's a nice man.
That's kind of permeated down through the force, too.
It does.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're a good soul. You really are, and a happy soul.
Now about that ticket you got.
Yeah, but do you know, I'm 78 years old, so I've been driving since I was 16. Mm-hmm. I have never had a ticket.
Well, that's good.
I suppose
we can arrange that.
Leaving here now.
We can work on that within the week, that was Chief. May not hold up, but we can give her a ticket.
You know, I suppose it's inevitable that we have to address this business in Florida and the brouhaha across the country about what in the world are we going to do. And these kids now that survived that are trying to form a movement whereby people will be promoting gun control. Mm-hmm. I think Illinois can stand up as a shining example of gun control. We have more laws than anybody else, I understand, on gun control. How's that working for Chicago?
Not well, unfortunately.
Not so much.
Yeah.
Not so much.
It's not necessarily the gun. We see this all over. It's more of a mental health issue than it is a gun issue. So, and that's what really needs to be addressed. Having the laws in place, and it could be nationwide, but it's happened here in the state of Illinois where we've had shootings at schools, even with the mental health and the FOID application status. And because when you get a FOID card, and if you go to a mental health facility, your FOID status is revoked for a certain amount of time, and then you get it reinstated if for some reason you aren't actually have a mental health condition. But that FOID status can be revoked. It's firearms owner identification card. So,
but you know, even that, the FOID cards aren't a panacea because once again, may I refer to the big city up north of Chicago? I bet you if you checked it on all the people who have guns up there, the percentage of those who have a FOID card to go along with their gun might be a little different number.
Yep, absolutely.
It's easy for me to sit here and say this, real easy. But don't we have enough laws? It's the enforcement. This guns like an AK-47, AR-15, or whatever they are. Those ought not to be available to the civilian population, except for hunters. I know. I'm a member of the NRA, have been Not now. I've gotten too old. I just carry a broom now instead of a gun. But there's so many laws out there. And look at this case down there in Florida. Our FBI, who's having some troubles these days now anyway, somebody dropped the ball down there.
Yep.
You know,
Laws aren't gonna fix that.
anytime one of these tragedies happen, and God knows they seem to multiply, but there's a great hue and cry. We got to be tougher. We got to be tougher. We got to go have tough laws out there. Chicago has very stringent laws. They have more murders than any place in the country. Maybe we ought to ban cars. They kill people. You know, more.
Yeah. Or
Seriously,
sugar.
I don't want to be
Sugar
right
kills
about
a lot
this.
of people.
I don't want to be flippant about this at all. It's a very, very deep subject.
No, exactly.
But there's a hue and cry, a clamor for more laws. Laws aren't going to do it.
No. Again, down there in Florida, like you said, there was an error on I believe it was the FBI's fault, because we're preaching right now. If you see something, you got to say something. And because police officers can't be everywhere. We can't be monitoring all the social media. But you, as citizens, are looking through that social media, and if you see something that raises an eyebrow, that throws a red flag, then that's when you need to be saying something to your local law enforcement agency. And then we're supposed to push it up the line to the FBI and get it investigated. So, and in that case, in Florida, it looks like the ball got dropped someplace in between the FBI and the local office.
What's the policy in Illinois regarding communication between law enforcement agencies? Not only you and the sheriff, but then clear up the line.
Yeah, we have a good relationship with the FBI office in Springfield. Sean Cox is the special agent in charge there in Springfield. We've met several times and we've had communications. I've had those conversations before, but we have that open communication between the offices. So if something comes to we will involve the Illinois State Police, we will involve FBI, and we will do an investigation on somebody, because we don't have the resources locally to do a lot of computer investigations, and that's what a lot of this stuff is anymore with the social media and et cetera. We got a couple guys that have some training. Probably I'm the most trained, but I don't have the time to do those type of investigations anymore. So we're trying to get more officers more acquainted to doing those type of investigations. Our detectives are getting better at handling those types of investigations, but that's where we still lean on the Illinois State Police, the FBI, and every other three-letter agency that there is. So,
Chief, do we have an organization of chiefs of police throughout the state of Illinois?
Yes, we have the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police, which I belong to. We have the International Association of Chiefs of Police, which I belong to. And then I belong to the Central Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police.
And through these organizations, there filters down all kinds of daily, almost, I suspect, input on this terrible gun problem we have. I'm sure people meet time after time, day after day. How do we get around this? How do we solve that? What can we do?
What can we do? That's the good question. Again, it comes down to a mental health issue, and law enforcement, our hands are tied in a lot of aspects, especially when it comes to communication devices and what we can get to and what we can't do without having a warrant or without having probable cause. So I think we need to open up the door a little bit more when we have somebody that has a suspected mental health issue. Right now they have to really state they have either the intention to harm themselves or harm somebody else, and they have to actually explicitly say that before we can really get involved in the mental health aspect of that.
You mean like I'd have to come in and say, Chief Adams, I think I'm going to hurt myself or my neighbor?
Yes, then we can get involved. But
Oh, good grief.
but if you
I worry about that neighbor part.
You should. Him too.
But when it comes to the just the investigation part of those social media posts, they don't say it right off the bat, but being able to get in there and see more information. But if you lock your profile up, then we as police officers don't have access to that unless somebody else gives us access who's a friend of somebody else. That
We'd like to
how
think,
that goes. So
we sit here in Mayberry. You'd like to think that we're immune from that sort of thing in a small community like Lincoln, Illinois. Fact is, even Burtonview had Crazy Fred Smith when I was a kid. So, but I don't want to make light of this whole subject. I don't mean to do that at all. This is a terribly serious nationwide problem. But you'd like to think that we're insulated from that here in this small community. Fact is, day after day, we don't know.
No, you don't know where those mental health issues are going to pop up.
Well, and they
that's the
must
thing.
pop up more frequently right along because the drugs would feed that problem too, surely.
Yeah, to a certain degree, but a lot of these mental health issues, I mean, even in, this 18-year-old, I don't know what his history is with drugs, but apparently he has some type of disconnect inside of his head that should have been addressed well before this ever got to this point. But, there was... my wife's has a cousin who he's a preacher up in the Galesburg area, and there was a I guess somebody came to his church. There was a male subject, and he kind of threw some red flags to the pastor there, and the pastor kind of inquired about what was his reason to come to the church, etc. And after sitting down, this young man made a statement to the pastor that, my last church, I wasn't happy with the people there, and I really, I feel like killing them. And he was going to keep that to himself until he talked to me. But after he talked to me and I explained to him, no, you need to report that to your local law enforcement agency because that needs to be investigated. Well, that ended up turning into an FBI and the state police thing, and they did a search warrant on this young man's house, and they found some things in there that would cooperate that he was thinking about harming those people in that church. Yeah,
I can understand why people don't come forward because from the time you're little, your mom is telling you, don't be a tattletale.
Yeah.
So that finally sets in about the time you should be telling
There's a point to
somebody
be made there. I presume, and Chief, not every day, but you and your force, you have meetings about these situations, and how would we relate to this, or how would we relate to that? And you try to, as best as you can, try to plan ahead what your reaction will be.
Yeah. Well, the big thing with responding to any of this, we have the active shooter. We know the policies. We know how to get inside school and eliminate the threat as soon as possible. We're training our officers. We have to bypass those injured people because we have to eliminate the threat. That's the big thing as law enforcement is we have to eliminate the threat. Then once we did that, then we start on the life safety aspect and start taking care of the injured, et cetera, and getting the medical teams into place. And we hone in on that. We train on that all the time. But the problem is the mental health things. If somebody wants to hurt somebody, it doesn't matter if it's a gun or if it's a knife or anything. It's hard to plan for. And even like this down there in Florida, he kind of used their school response to his advantage by pulling the fire alarm. So all those kids started going out inside the hallways, made easy targets. So there's no easy answer to any type of situation.
We don't have an easy answer to how we arrange and accommodate our sponsors, but we always work them in every Wednesday. So go ahead, Mr. Ash. And after Mr. Ash has pushed a requisite number of buttons and twirled a number of dials and so forth, we're back on the air at WLCN.
And petted the cat 15
And he had
times.
to move Mabel in order to get to the keyboard. A weekly operation up here. Viewpoint 96.3. Once again, our Chief of Police of Lincoln, Illinois, has been gracious enough to give us some time and come up and visit with us. We always appreciate our local officials taking the time. It isn't as if they didn't have anything else to do. His plate is pretty full, and more so than ever right now. Let's get to the building on 5th Street, which will become your new headquarters. At what point in time does looking ahead to the date of the completion date, where are we, Chief?
Well, at points, approximately, they're hoping, they're actually ahead of schedule right now, so they're hoping to have the interior portion of the building done by the end of May. So then hopefully, as long as the weather holds off this spring, they should be able to get the exterior done hopefully by the end of June or July. So we're looking hopefully July or August.
But most of it was interior work, wasn't it?
Well,
exterior was in good shape.
Now, for those of us
Except your yard's a mess.
Yeah, it is a mess, and they will get it cleaned up.
Get that cleaned up.
It'll look pretty when they're done.
There are always those out there in any community with a jaundiced eye and look, what the hell do we need that for? Let's address that need, Chief. I know, and we know here in the studio, they're terribly cramped and crowded office situation there, but it's more than that. So let's address that issue.
Absolutely. So the reason this all got started is the big thing was the officer safety issues. Right now, you're asking your officers to use 1,200 square foot of building. So there isn't much room for separate areas to do the work where it needs to be done at. For instance, right now, if I go to a crime scene, I pick up a bloody shirt or I take it off a victim, etc. It's blood-soaked and it has to be dried out. Right now, we have to take that back to our police department and we try to dry that out on paper bags laying on the floor. Well, there should be an evidence processing room. Yes, a room for that with a drying cabinet that is especially sealed and there's no air contamination that would float in the air, because if blood dries and there's Hep C or Hep B or AIDS or anything else in there and it gets airborne, certain particles can get into your bloodstream and then you can get infected too. So that's a huge issue right there. Number two is the evidence packaging in regards to drugs, because back in the day, crack cocaine and marijuana, as long as it was contained in its area and you weren't putting it in your nose, you don't have too much to worry about. Well, with the heroin and especially the fentanyl and carfentanyls, if you even touch that, it absorbs through your skin. You can have an overdose situation.
If I picked up something off of this desk, raw material, in my hands, there's a danger to me.
There's a danger to you. So now our officers have to glove up. They have to put a breathing mask on and they have to put glasses on to try to prevent that getting into their pores in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, the Illinois State Police just a couple weeks ago stopped a vehicle out on Interstate 55 and they found a kilo of what they thought was cocaine. It tested positive initially for cocaine, but when it got to the lab, it was actually a kilo of fentanyl. Just right outside Lincoln here.
So if this officer is handling that without protection and
if they didn't take the appropriate steps, they could have an overdose situation.
Interesting.
And if they didn't have Narcan with them, or they didn't have, if the bad things happen, that officer could have died from that overdose. So
that's one issue of your direct need, a definite need for this new facility.
Definite need. Well, and the thing is, they're trying to eat and doing all this other work in the same location right now because we don't have separate facilities to do that. There's a kitchen downstairs to prepare your food, but there's not really seating area unless you use a blue room. And the guys like to watch TV
Paper
upstairs
plates on your lap
to watch their, eat their lunch and stuff like that. So, which is the same place where they're packaging stuff and putting all this evidence together before they put it into the evidence temporary lockers, which we don't have a real good place for that because it's all crammed into one little room with next to our interview room and our investigations room. And so we're cramped so bad in there that we don't have the room to do what we need to do safely.
So ideally, each officer on your force should have a small locker of his own.
Yep.
That's not possible.
Yep. EMA has grown.
It's a little thing, I know, but in the great picture, those little things add up in the first
Oh, yeah. Well, and good for EMA, and they've grown. They're utilizing essentially most of the basement now. We have a couple storage rooms down there that we put some of our evidence in, and which that's a hazard in and of itself because it's underneath the stairs. So when you're trying to get the thing, you're banging your head on the stairs, and it's not safe either. But here in this new place, we're going to have those facilities. We're going to have a place to clean your guns. We're going to have a place to package the evidence. That evidence will go into temporary lockers, which makes it an efficient process to get it into our evidence room, which is going to be much more bigger and more secure than what we have now.
People may ask the simple question, why do they have to clean your guns? Well, it's very simple. These fellows have to practice, and they go out to the range somewhere and practice. Those guns,
when we want to use those guns, they've got to work. If otherwise,
absolutely.
Well, it's no good to you if it doesn't work.
It's not going to be good for us, or not be good for somebody that we're actually trying to protect. So,
who drew up the plans for this station, Chief?
Well, when we
did it in conjunction with your input and Chief Valakovic's input and so forth. All of you got together and.
Yeah, we what we did was essentially we did the walkthrough initially of Jefferson School, and it's built like a tank. I mean, it's concrete structure with steel.
Sure.
It's a good building. No reason for it to go sitting empty and laying there. So, and it saved us, $3 million just getting that building in of itself because, if we had to build from scratch, you're looking at $6 million building. So now we're down to a $3 million building, and we're getting everything we need plus more. So because we did the space study initially to see how much space we needed, and they said we need about 12,000 square feet for our size of agency and what we're doing. And this is 15,500 square foot. So, but we're going to have a nice big training room too, which is going to be nice. But when we planned this out, we looked at I kind of looked at it and I was like, well, I kind of like this here and that there and this here. And then we got the architects involved and they threw out this plan. And I was like, wow, I would have never thought of anything like this, how they got it all put together and the ideas of how the functions worked just in the little detention area we have, and the evidence room and how that was going to be put together, the locker rooms. They really put a lot of thought into this, and I think that's a lot of just because of their experience, and that's why we chose them in the first place.
Our two listeners might have a question or two.
Well, maybe not both of them, but
or both of you. Seriously, very seriously. Somebody might have a question of Chief Paul Adams, who's been kind enough to come over here and spend some time with us, and tell us about our new facility out there, 648-5510. If you think your question's silly, don't worry about it. We may laugh, but we still answer it. No, I don't want to be quite about that either. This is a very big thing for Lincoln, Illinois. It's a very big thing.
You'll have other police departments coming to look at your new facility and thinking, wow, they'll be green with envy.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. What I've seen so far, I've really thought this is going to work out well for our officers, and this is going to be a building here for the next 50, 100 years.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Because as long as it's taken care of and we keep it up and, and put the work in it that needs to be put into it, it's going to be here for a while.
How many officers do you have on your force, Chief Adams?
Right now, including myself, 26 sworn officers.
Are we at a full?
No.
We're understaffed.
We're well below what, if you look at the average just for the central Illinois, we're well below what the average per population is.
But would our budget allow us to have a requisite number of officers?
No, probably not. The thing is right now, we don't have the room for any more people on the force. We have 3 investigators. I'd like to have another investigator in a narcotics area doing more than narcotics work, because that's a big problem we have. That is tied to the property crimes, and if you can get a hold of the narcotics issues in the town, then I think you have a better chance of getting a hold of those property issues and those crimes against persons. We also need office staff. We don't have any place to put any more office staff, because we have our officers doing a lot of administrative work right now that they shouldn't be doing. They should be out on patrol, but they've got to do the paperwork because we don't have the staff there to take care of that paperwork. For instance,
for those who don't know, I've been in your office complex, and as tiny as I am,
Yeah.
which is pretty tiny, it's pretty well crowded.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it really is. You're on top of one another in there.
Oh, yeah.
And you're a big bone fellow. How do you fit in there?
just having
just my
serious
head's problem.
conversations, sitting down. Maybe you want to have a somewhat quasi-private conversation with another officer about some matter. You can't hardly do that.
Not right now. No. It's nice being right there next to the guys, but it's also kind of a burden because they're always there. Hey, Paul. Hey, Chief. Hey, I have a problem with this. I'm having this issue, and they're right there. It makes it a little bit too convenient for them because trying to do something, and it's always okay.
Yeah.
Back and forth. So
648-5510. Ask your questions of Chief Paul Adams. What one feature in our new facility will you enjoy the most? Perhaps other than your own privacy for your own office, which would be a big thing.
Well, I think the nice thing is the gymnasium that was in the middle of Jefferson School. We've utilized that mostly for our training room. We're
your
going to have a training room or a conference room. So we're going to have a nice room for citizens to use, etc., for training. Hopefully, we're going to be able to host training there with cooperation from the mobile training unit in Springfield. So, if we can host that there, we usually get free seats and to training. So I think that's going to be a benefit to our community.
I'd like to ask you a little bit about social media. I know that everybody in the known world is very well acquainted with all the Facebooks and on and off type stuff, with the exception of myself. I am not a techie, not because I'm Pearl Pureheart, but because I don't understand
Finding
it
the
at all.
off button is difficult.
Now, is it a help to you sometimes when you get to investigating things, or is it something that just is a thorn in your side?
No, it's definitely a help. We've solved several crimes just by putting some information out on Facebook. In fact, Casey's down on 5th Street was robbed by a young man that had a certain clothing on, and we were able to put that clothing out. And within minutes, we were getting responses from people saying, "Hey, I just saw that guy at Walmart."
Is that right?
Exactly. It's same clothing and everything. So we were able to solve that within hours
Because
just
of
by
social
putting
media.
that on social media.
Yeah.
That's an interesting observation.
Yeah. So, and we've had several of those go out. There's some that we put out there that we never got a hit on, which means usually those are people that came from out of town. So nobody local knew who they were. There was always ideas of who they were, but it would never pan out. But yeah, social media has been a big help for those type of investigations.
How about home break-ins? Are there a lot of home break-ins?
We still get a reasonable amount. It's been going down over the last couple of years, which is good. But this last January, we had a spike back up again. But I also noticed that we got a lot of burglars that we put away about 4 years ago getting back out now. So
so
yeah,
they can
there's a
go back to
correlation.
work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
support
Well,
themselves.
Mrs. Busby asked because she's a veteran breakee
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And
twice.
Yeah.
Her neighbor got the people come in there twice.
Oh, really?
Not say a word about it.
yeah, at one point in my history with robbery, they told me, "Oh, this would be somebody," and I said, "Well, then why don't you arrest him?" And they said, "We can't until we catch him red-handed."
Yeah.
Well, you can't sit in everybody's house and garage and just wait.
Yeah. It's hard for those burglary investigations. I mean, burglary investigations, you got to have some type of evidence. Usually, if it's a burglary, somebody didn't see it in the first place, so you don't usually have witnesses. So some type of DNA or fingerprint left at the scene are the best ways to solve those type of crimes. Or just doing some investigative work and talking to people and see if anybody knew who might have done it. We may get a fingerprint, but that suspect's fingerprint is not in the database yet, so
Yeah.
it just sits there. So we've got to do that back end work. Say, hey, do you know who might have done this? And if we can get that tie in and we can get that person's fingerprints, then we can send it down. But they're hard to solve sometimes, and sometimes we don't have enough information to solve them. So.
So, and I suppose they fence the things before you can say Jack Robinson too, so that you don't find them with it in their pockets or whatever.
Yeah, we have that issue. The nice thing is with a lot of the fencing places, like the pawn shops and those retail or resale shops, they have to report those serial numbers and those items to law enforcement now, so which is a good thing. So we're getting the lists of those items so we can compare that to the items that are lost. So sometimes we make those correlations that way. So it's not as easy just getting rid of the property.
Yeah.
Speaking of serial numbers, reminds me again of guns. There, at one point in time, was it a law that we register our guns with the police department, or maybe I just did that because I thought it was the thing to do.
It might have been the thing to do. I don't think we've ever done that in the 20 years I've been there.
It was a little quite.
We
big.
were at one time. We were actually
for me every day now.
Yeah, when Tim Butterfield was our community policing officer and Rich Montcalm, they were registering bicycles at one time, but I don't think we've ever registered guns themselves.
In fact, would it do any good at all for people to register their weapons with you?
Well, a lot of people are afraid to do it anyway because they're afraid the federal government or some other government's going to come in and take them if they register them. So,
well, those of us who are my age remember Mr. Hitler. He took every gun in the country of Germany, and then the first thing you know, knew what happened.
Oh yeah.
So,
well, let's get back for a little minute to that gun control business. If they came to you and they said, Chief, what do you think the best approach is? And how do we go about it affordably? To keeping people from ruining one another the way it happened in Florida?
Well, again, that young man actually bought that gun legally down there in Florida. So,
why do they sell them?
Well, the thing is,
try to go dove hunting with something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, you go.
It's not necessarily for dove hunting, but that our Constitution protects the right for us to bear arms and to have arms, and that was because, of course, the government would try to overthrow the citizens, and people have to be able to protect themselves. So those constitutional rights there that is the big fight. And again, this isn't about the gun control issue. Down there was more of the mental health issue, and I like Illinois has the FOID card, so you do have to go through a background process to even get a FOID card. So I think it's a good step for the rest of the nation to do, to at least have some type of registration process to get those guns. Because if I'm a law-abiding citizen, I should be able to get a FOID card, and I should be able to purchase the guns that I want to or need. I need.
In an ideal world, that's the way it works.
It works.
And those of us who are my age, and many others too, but those of us who are steeped in history are very, very stiff about protecting that Second Amendment. I mean, it's ironclad.
Oh, yeah.
It should be inviolate.
Yep.
But there's a lot of those. Well, I'm not going to get into that. I might get thrown off the air. So
it's a touchy subject, unfortunately.
Yes.
But again, I think if those processes were in place, and people, again, if you see something, you've got to say something. So if somebody sees something on Facebook, or they have a fan, especially family members, even if your family members are saying some things that are raising those red flags or raising your eyebrows, then you need to say something, because and it's not like law enforcement is going to come in and arrest that person. We're going to get them through a mental health evaluation. Excuse me. That mental health evaluation will determine if they should or shouldn't have a FOID card after that. So we get them seen by a mental health professional, and if they do have to have some type of therapy for the mental health issue, then that notification is made to the Illinois State Police, and they can't buy any guns. So,
but there are all these safeguards in place. It's just that you have to get it started. And that goes back to people. I said before that these people who had 13 kids out in California that were living in the bedroom, they interviewed on the news a couple of the neighbors, and they said, I know, we thought there was something funny going on, but they never said anything.
Yeah, we're here. That's what we're for. You guys, the public is an extension of the police department. The police officers, we're just citizens trying to do the job that nobody else wants to do. But if nobody tells us what's going on, tells us the information, then we all fail.
Now, what if I did call you and say my next door neighbor is acting strangely? What about anonymity?
Yeah, to a certain degree, you can remain anonymous. That's not a problem. You can call it into Crime Stoppers, even 732-3000. It doesn't matter how you report it. There's websites you can report that straight to the federal government, and you can remain anonymous. So
Is that a 24/7 line, by the way?
yeah, 732-3000 is
24/7.
Yeah, it's an answering machine, so you just have to leave your information on the machine.
You're not to have some Mabel sitting there
And
with
they
it.
follow up if you do it on the computer or what have you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we hope so.
Well,
It may not happen down in Florida, but yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Chief, I like to think we're not unique here in Logan County, but we had Sheriff Nichols here in your seat last week, and I'm sitting here and thinking of the cooperation that Mr. and Mrs. Joe Smith on the street don't really understand and know about. But you have a lot of cooperation between the Logan County Sheriff's Office and the City of Lincoln's Police Department, which inures to everybody's benefit.
Yes, absolutely.
We're lucky here
Yeah.
to have that kind of leadership, and perhaps not every county enjoys that.
Yeah. May not. You do have some separate.
There are egos out there.
Yeah, exactly. There are
Uh-huh.
egos. We don't have that here. Me and the sheriff get along well. Our investigators get along well, and that's the people who need to be talking all the time. And our patrol guys are always talking to each other all the time about things. So, there's a lot of information that our patrol guys do know that sometimes doesn't float up to me. But those guys know what's going on when you ask a question. So,
Now, do you have undercover investigators out there wandering around periodically?
well, we have one narcotics officer, and he is assigned to the Central Illinois Enforcement Group with the Illinois State Police, and they do do stings, undercover stings, and stuff like that here. So,
and they're plainclothes people?
plainclothes, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, you and the sheriff are both very open type people, good communicators. So it stands to reason that you'd be able to get along very famously.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that there are personality differences that make that impossible in some counties. And
It could, yeah.
you can't fix that. I mean, if you hate me, I can't do much to fix it.
No. Yeah.
Which brings to a point. Am I just being kind of glossing over the whole thing by saying that as far as gun laws and so forth? I make this statement, Chief, and see, am I right in this? I say, if a bad guy wants to get a gun, irrespective of the laws that are on the books or what you can put on the books, and if a bad guy wants to get in, he'll get one some way. Am I right in that?
You're right.
So laws,
I mean,
in
for
and of
instance,
themselves.
You mentioned Chicago. I mean, they're getting guns all the time, and a lot of the guns are coming from Indiana and Michigan up there, and so I mean,
Well, they're right at the corner of
yeah,
every,
they're right there.
every
It's
place.
easy access. Yeah.
Other than the ever-present drug problem, and we certainly still have that here in Lincoln, Logan County, what would be the biggest problem that you have in your force, other than economics, of course, the money to pay everybody the way they ought to be paid? But what is the one big problem that you see in your office, Chief?
Well, like I said, we don't. I think the facility is the biggest problem we have right now, and we're getting that fixed this year for hurdles to get over. The next thing is just having the cooperation from the community. I think that cooperation needs to be better. We need to be able to communicate back and forth more, utilizing Crime Stoppers, et cetera, and it's gotten better over the last few years. We're getting a lot more information than we have over previous years. Sometimes it's overwhelming sometimes how much information we're getting, and people calling in and say, hey, I see this, or I see that. And there's a lot of false calls that we do go on, but I'd rather check them out and make sure that those are false calls than somebody just say, well, it's no big deal. They're not worried about that type of thing. No, we are. We are worried about it. It can be just somebody in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I just don't. We can't investigate some of those because a lot of it is due to race. We're getting a lot of these calls that certain person is walking in a certain area, and I'm sorry, they can.
Yeah, go
and
figure.
we can't stop somebody for that just by walking. If they're doing something illegal, then yes, please call us, and we will investigate that. So,
Are you aware of any? Excuse me, Judith. Kay, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to ask, like, if you see mysterious lights, like flashlights at a neighbor's, would that, and you knew that they weren't home,
yeah, that would be a call.
would that be legit?
Yeah, absolutely. If
Because you know, we people, especially we old people, we worry about bothering you with something that ends up being nothing.
I understand that, and we get that all the time, but don't worry about bothering us. That's our job. That's what we're there for. With sending a unit as soon as we can to investigate it and look into it. So if we don't know the information, then you're possibly letting a lot of good information go.
Quickly, doggone clock went out on us again. I don't like to use the word cop, C-O-P. That's just not, it's a kind of a demeaning word to me. But anyway, is there any anti-cop feeling out there on the street that you are aware of here in Lincoln?
I don't think so. I believe our citizens support us, and I think we get a lot of support from the people in our community. And I hope to encourage that and keep that going. But I don't think we have an anti-sentiment other than those criminals that hate us, because we got to be the father, essentially.
Well, we can't
We gotta
be the parent, and
You
they
know,
don't
we
like the
can't be
parents
buddy
sometimes.
with everybody. Joe Smith on the
Exactly.
street and Sally Smith. You can't go to their house and drink coffee, but you've got a job to do.
Exactly.
Chief Paul Adams has been with us again today. We really thank you, Paul. I'm going to close one with the quotation that I think we ought to think about every day here. Police officers put on their badge every morning, not knowing for sure if they'll come home to take it off at night. Thank you very much, Chief Paul Adams.
Thank you.